Today I'm going to show you the exact ideation engine that we utilize within our entire content engine that I've already shown you last video that generates me 10 qualified and new video ideas every single morning. So I never stare at the blank page and I know every single day, what do I need to post today in order to uphold the ecosystem of content and distribution to eventually generate money off of content. Now, in today's video, I'm going to show you specifically the ideation engine because the number one content on consistency and quality killer is the blank page. The question, what should I post today that could be relevant for my audience? Because two things are most of the time happening if you're sitting in front of the blank page. Either you're just avoiding it in its entirety, which means it's completely going to kill your consistency, or you're going to say, okay, the algorithm wants me to be consistent, so I'll just post something that is not even really thought through, which means you're now going to post content that might not even be that relevant to your ICP, but you're just posting it for the sake of it, which means quality and consistency are both being killed through the blank page. Now, this engine changes exactly that because this engine gives me 10 researched and scored ideas waiting for me every single morning, which means I never waste time on brainstorming, but I choose from the topics that I now know that they're going to work for my ICP because my brain and my entire engine knows exactly what they want to hear and what aligns with my offer. And more about that in just a second. Now, the ideation engine is one of 6 engines that eventually come together as our entire content engine, which I already recorded a video about the other day. So if you haven't watched it yet, make sure you watch the entire thing, because as you can see, I'm going way more in depth on how also the distribution of content works and so on. Now, this entire engine makes sure that the only job that you have to do is the recording, which means you sit down for 20, 30 minutes max, or maybe longer, maybe shorter, it depends on the style that you want. And everything beforehand and afterwards is completely being taken care of the engine. But the ideation engine is basically the foundation. So on that note, again, if you haven't watched it yet, make sure you watch the last one. And with no further ado, let's get straight into it. And if you have already watched a few videos of mine, you know that the one thing that I always emphasize that you need to have for this, in order for this to even make sense to set it up, for this to even work in the first place and not be generic, is the context orbit. The context orbit is a product that we've developed ourselves, which is a type of second brain, a business brain, as you've probably already heard it somewhere on social media. But the difference here is that that context orbit has a scalability, a preciseness and an efficiency that a normal business brain does not have, because it doesn't matter if you have 5 or 500 employees. It doesn't matter how many terabytes of information you have in this context orbit on that server online. It's always going to give you the very precise information. Plus also, again, and that is where we're talking about employees, it doesn't matter how many you have, because everyone works from one context orbit. Everyone's knowledge goes into one orbit and everyone can work from one orbit. Now think about it. If every single person has more knowledge than the most senior person in your company would have, what does that do to the quality of the work? Now, why is this so important? Because this is literally a copy of your entire business that is adaptive, which means it always knows your next steps. It always knows all the decisions that you take. Now, within here, we have 5 directories that are most important for this specific engine, which is number 1, identity. It has to know exactly who are you. Like, for example, in my case, who's Noah Tasler? What is my background story? Where does my expertise actually come from? What qualifies me as a person to even be able to talk about this topic in the first place? What qualifies me as an authority and an expert within this industry to even be able to talk about content engines, Claude code, booking calls, or becoming the authority of your space? What have I done? What are the clients that I've worked with? Who am I connected to? And so on. So identity, everything that basically qualifies you to be the person speaking in front of the camera, but then also how do you speak? How do you communicate? What is your style of speaking? Are you more formal, informal, casual, authoritative? You name it. Because there's so many different styles out there, and it has to understand exactly what is your style. And that is super important because this then builds the entire foundation so that the content that it creates for you is actually sounding exactly like you. Then we've got number 2. The offer, because this is super important, and I'm also going to show you in just a second how these points connect to each other. Offer, eventually, okay, what is it that you offer? Pretty straightforward. So the different offers, for example, in our case, the code authority engine, which is the infrastructure name that we gave the entire packaging that, for example, contains all the engines, the content engine, and also all the stuff that we're doing in real estate and B2B service businesses, whatever, it all falls under one name, which is the code authority engine. So that is our offer. What is the pricing? What are the guarantees? How do we work with it? Who have we already worked with? What are the use cases that we have in here? What can we do for clients? Stuff like that. And then sales, super important. So the system understands exactly what are the objections that your ICPs actually have. What are the questions that they ask? What are the resistances, or what are just generally the problems that they face? Because if you know the problem, you can now brainstorm from an angle, from a perspective. Okay, what can I give my audience today that solves their specific problem that they know they have? So it has to have all of that entire information in there, but also, for example, sales methodology. So you've got all of that in there, which means sales, super important, but just as important as often identity. Next up, content kind of goes hand in hand with identity, because content eventually just, in other words, means that it knows exactly what style of content do you like. What do you usually prefer, longer videos, shorter videos? Because some people shine in short form while others just completely dominate in long form. So stuff like that. This is really about preferences, so you can actually build an engine where you can consistently execute on it. Because if, for example, you love short form videos, like recording them, but you absolutely hate long form videos, then we don't want to try to force yourself into something that you don't even like, because that's going to eventually, again, even if you automate it, bring down efficiency. Then we've got transcripts, super important. Most people don't even realize how much information relies in transcripts of, for example, past videos that you've recorded or calls that you have had. Because transcripts eventually means that, for example, sales call transcripts, again, it can pull from information that it gets from the clients on that call. What questions have they asked? What objections have they thrown at us? Where did they show resistance? Where did they feel understood? What problems were they mentioning? But also, for example, team calls or calls with existing clients. But then on the other side, also video scripts. It can extract, for example, again, the identity part. What tonality do you speak in? How do you speak? How do you pronounce certain things? How do you articulate yourself? All of that goes into transcripts. Now, the most important ones are offer, sales, and identity. Why? Because with identity, it, for example, knows what expertise do you have. With the offer, it knows what topics come close to the offer that you actually have. And with sales, it knows what problems does your ICP want to solve, which means now it's going to, when it researches topics, it's going to see what topics align with your expertise, what can you actually talk about, where can you shine with your expertise to build the most trust, what topics at the same time also give you a foot in the door for your offer, because it's something that is related to your offer. And then the third thing is sales. What do they actually need to hear? What do they want to hear? What are the questions that they have? So that the offer, or basically the topic that we're now talking about, aligns with all three things. And that is how you create a certain retention. That is how you create curiosity and attention while still making sales off of it. And then with all of that knowledge, it goes into the sources, which is where the engine looks at every single day, which is super important. And how this works on the technical side is pretty straightforward. And by the way, this is also how part of the context orbit looks like. We have hundreds of files just for these 5 directories built up in a certain way, which is so important. And which is also why I'm laying such an emphasis and having the right infrastructure behind this. Because if you just use a normal business brain for it, also works, but it is not going to be as scalable, especially because one of the biggest bottlenecks with a normal business brain is that a certain scale of information within it is going to stop spitting out the perfect information and the right information that you're actually asking for every single time. Which means that is why an information orbit, a context orbit vault like this is so important. As you can see, we're here in the vault, and that is that. Now, the technical side for the sources, pretty straightforward. You've got the Apify engine, which is basically our engine inside the context orbit vault that knows exactly how to run Apify in the most efficient way, which means it's going to pick the most effective and also cost efficient scrapers per platform to make sure that we can scrape all the data in the most reliable and most secure, but also most cost efficient way every single day. Because of course, if it runs every single day, you don't want to create too many costs for that. Now, with that being said, the next thing that it also has is, of course, all the MCP connections to just be able to, whether that is even use Apify in the first place, but also pull call recordings, update into your Notion dashboard, and update the vault itself, so it has all of that information inside there. Now, what it actually looks at is, first of all, industry news and launches. So, for example, when Claude for Small Business launched, I immediately recorded a video for that, performed okay. We got like 1.2k views just in a few weeks. And that was, by the way, the first video that I ever recorded on this new whole AI topic with the new offer that we've got. Then it researches LinkedIn because, okay, industry news and launches are cool. But what if it is actually requested? What if it actually works right now on the platforms that we want to distribute to? Which means now it's going to research, okay, what actually performs right now on LinkedIn? So it doesn't just take random topics, but the ones where it already knows, okay, this will get certain traction on LinkedIn, for example. So that is already for generalized topic. Now, the next thing is where we get more feedback on what is actually requested. Reddit and communities. It's going to go through Reddit because on there, it actually gathers real questions from our audiences, which means then it knows exactly, okay, what are they personally thinking? What is the topics that they actually want to hear about? Super important. And then, of course, sales calls. Most people underestimate how much information they can get from one sales call because there's so much depth that you can gain from it, whether the questions the prospects actually ask, the moments where they feel resistant, and so on and so forth. It's also the technical questions that they ask. It all uncovers where there are points that you should already address before they ever get on the call to basically pre-qualify and pre-handle certain objections, let's say. And very important also that all of that information then goes back into the context orbit, which means for the next video, you'll already have so much more information of what they're thinking, what they want to hear, and so on. Now, this is basically the things that you need in place in order to be able to run this in the first place. Now, here's where we switch over to the part that comes after the research, because every single morning at 10 a.m. Central European time, in our case, it runs that entire research engine, which means it starts researching all these topics that we've now talked about, how it does that, and it does that every single morning. And that is scheduled, which means nobody has to do anything manually. And that is where we then go into research and scoring, which is super important and also super interesting if you take a look at it, because it's now going to research all your topics, right? So you've now got your topic bank right here, which means that it looked at, okay, what is currently new, what is actually fitting our ICP. Now we've got 3 criteria that we have in here to just see, okay, how new is this actually? First one, when did this happen? So we actually have the information for the content itself, and we also know, okay, if this is a hot topic, is this completely new, like did this launch today or yesterday, or has it been on the market for 1 or 2 weeks now? Because then the likelihood that other people have already addressed this is very high, which kind of takes out that lever that we want to have with our topics. Then the relevancy scored from 1 to 10 towards our ICP, again, because it already knows exactly who is our ICP, who are we actually selling this to. With that information, it now sees, okay, how well do they actually need this? How many prospects have asked these questions? And then you can see that on here, it just scales here 10, 10, 9, 9, 9. And then sometimes it also has 6, 5, or whatever. But those it usually doesn't show within the dashboard, because we want to make sure that we only post about topics that are actually a perfect fit for our ICP. So that is the scoring engine within here. And then offer fit. So it tells us exactly, okay, why did it even research it in the first place? For example, here, what in an agency actually doesn't need a human, the automation map, so what exact processes can, for example, be automated by the context orbit. Here, data center ICP agency delivery automation is the offer. Daily pain saves real time plus money. Trending now, what to automate in Claude and B2B. So here it gave me the exact reason. Why is this even an offer fit? Which is something that we talked about before. Why is this expertise that I have, plus a topic that I can now talk about, how does this even bound into the offer? So we then eventually get the foot in the door to then eventually also pitch them, have a CTA where the thing that they've just spent 20 minutes on watching, we can now use their interest and that pull to just make sure that we pull them onto our calendar, that they book a call and that we can close them. And from there are more scoring criteria that we need to take a look at to also use all of this and turn it into a strategy. Because, for example, very straightforward, we say Monday, Tuesday, top of funnel, then Wednesday, Thursday, middle funnel, Friday, Saturday, bottom of funnel, and then Sunday, rewind. So, for example, Sunday is then basically personal post, right? Which means now it's going to score it. Okay, we've got how new is this? How relevant is this? And why does this even fit our offer? And now based on that, it's going to give us exactly when we should even post it, because it's going to score it. Is this top of funnel, middle of funnel, or bottom of funnel? Which you can see right here. And the perfect thing now is that we can say, okay, here, bam, we've got ICP score 9 to 10, which is really good, which means, okay, now we can be sure that there is relevancy towards ICP. And now we're going to take a look at, for example, today is Tuesday, which means I would take a top of funnel topic. Let's say, for example, why 88% of companies are profitable, blah, blah, blah. I don't know what it says afterwards, but that is, for example, the topic for today. So I'm going to say distribute topic, why 88% of companies are profitable. And then it's going to do that for today. And then I can record the video and then that's done. And then next of all, tomorrow, Wednesday, which means, okay, now we want to go for middle funnel. Let's actually take the 10 out of 10. What in an agency actually doesn't need a human, the automation map, which is exactly that topic. So that is next up what we're going to distribute for Wednesday. For then Thursday, again, middle funnel. Let's take, for example, I'll build my agency's context orbit, or no, automate client reporting. That's for Thursday. And then same thing with bottom of funnel for Friday and Saturday. Now, therefore, we've now just had the funnel, or basically the engine, give us every single topic for the entire week, because we have a strategy behind it that it understands. And then from there, it goes into the dashboard. Now we've got 10 topics scored, sourced, waiting in Notion, ready to be distributed, and that every single day. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is how the entire ideation engine works in order for me to never have a problem in the first place with either consistency or quality, because it knows exactly what my ICP wants to hear, what I can talk to, and what gets my foot into the door for my offer eventually to be able to pitch them in the first place. On that note, As I already mentioned before, if you haven't watched the last video yet where I talked about the entire content engine, where the ideation engine is one of 6 engines of that entire infrastructure, make sure that you watch the entire thing, because this might absolutely transform your entire business and the way that you run content. On that note, if you want to have this ideation engine and the content engine in its entirety built for your company, then book a call using the Calendly link in the description down below, or DM me the word content on LinkedIn. On that note, I'll see you in the next one.